Oh, testing, testing. Okay, I see the sound wave waving around. Okay, now, boys, now, first of all, I'm so sorry. I suck. Okay, now, what happened is that the answer I sent you, it's actually missing part 4 and the chapter revision for our chapter 11 homework, right? That's why I'm taking a video just to tackle part 4 and the final part. Okay, so once again, I suck. I'm so sorry. Okay, now, let's get started. Okay, now in part 4, when we talk about per unit subsidy, right? Now, first of all, let's take a look at the MC questions, right? Here, now you're as usual, right? You're given a table, right? And suppose after the imposition of a per unit subsidy, right? The market price dropped to $10. Okay, now this is a very important information. Dropped to $10. Now, originally, where was the equilibrium price, right? It was at here, $13. And we have 200 units, right? Now, we need to determine what is the total amount of subsidy paid by the government, right? Now, just as a revision, the total amount is actually the per unit subsidy here times the quantity transacted, okay? This is the total amount, right? Now, we obviously was not given the per unit subsidy, right? But can we deduce that? Yes. Now, the thing is, it says it drops from 13 to $10, right? Now, in order for the market price to drop from here to here, right? We need this to become the new equilibrium, right? But here, take a look. 260, 110, not equilibrium, right? Now, if you remember, with a subsidy, it's going to shift the QS column. In fact, this is a supply column, right? Now, therefore, we need this guy to become 260 instead, right? Then let's check. 260 right here. Let's use a green pen here, right? 260 here, 260 here. You see it changes from 15 to $10. So why is it possible? It's only possible because there is a per unit subsidy of $5, right? Originally, only $15 would I be willing to make 260. Now I'm willing to make at $5 cheaper. Why? Because the government will give me $5, right? So here we have a $5 times a QT, which is 260. If I am correct, I think the answer, let's take a look, right? Here, $5, 260. I think the answer will be C, right? Yes, C will be the answer. Okay, 得唔得？咁做嘅啫。Now, then for question 2, which is a continuation of this question, it says there is a drop in supply, maybe because of a change in cost, such that the new market price becomes $16. Now, let's mark down something, okay? Now, if you have paid attention in our class and you have watched the previous videos, you will know that, right? This, what we call further change in supply, okay, does not affect our per unit subsidy situation. 嗱，佢係唔會搞到我哋原先個 per unit subsidy 嘅。Okay, these are two different things. Okay, so the original subsidy benefit, okay, the sharing should be the same, right? So what does that mean? 誒，窒機添。Yes, what does that mean? It means that the ratio shouldn't change. Now, what is the original ratio? Original ratio. Obviously, we have a $5 subsidy. This is given by the government. We see that the price dropped by $3 because of the subsidy, right? So what happens here? We have a $3 price drop. 又窒機，玩嘢, okay? $3 price drop. Remember a drop in price. Who would benefit? This is consumer subsidy benefit. Now, therefore, the rest of the $2 will be our producer subsidy benefit. We see that consumer to producer, 3 to 2. Answer will be B, okay? It shouldn't change, okay? 第一個啦, since the price increase, there is no subsidy benefit. No. Remember this sentence, right? Further change in supply will not affect the sharing of the benefit, okay? And total subsidy benefit is this one, okay? Now, these two, just do the calculation yourself. 我唔嘥咁多時間啦，好嗎? Okay, now finally, here. 哇，唔震嘅。Okay, here are in focus finally, okay? Now, consumer subsidy benefit may be more than producer subsidy benefit when demand is, now, 我哋諗先. Here, the question says, CSB more than PSB. Now, we have already said for many times, okay? 記住啊, more elastic. I have so many just now, right? Then we eat less, 係咪啊? Elastic 嗰個食少啲啊嘛, okay? Which in operation means that ED, since it is eating more, it is less elastic than ES. This is the only conclusion we have, okay? So let's see which of the following cases would be possible, okay? Let's say case number 1, elastic, inelastic. 我諗先. Case number 1, elastic, what does that mean? It means that this one larger than 1. Inelastic, smaller than 1. Is it possible for smaller than 1 to be larger than 1? 好似念急口令咁樣，唔知你明唔明啊? Okay, obviously this is not possible, right? So 1 is not correct. Now number 2, elastic. Is it possible? Yes. Let me give you a case. Let's say this is 1.3, which is larger than 1. Here, right? Which is larger than 1. Then another case here, elastic, 1.7. 1.7 larger than 1.3. So this matches also elastic, possible. Case number 3, inelastic, of course, 0.3 smaller than 1 inelastic. 0.7 smaller than 1 also inelastic, but it also more elastic than demand, right? So possible. Inelastic, elastic. Let's see. Smaller than 1, larger than 1. Is larger than 1 larger than smaller than 1? Of course, it must be correct, right? So here, you will see answer 2, 3, and 4. Answer would be D. Okay, so here we have the MCs finished. Okay, 好嘛? 嗱，上堂都講過㗎啦，好嘛？不過驚你哋唔記得啦。Now, what about the next page? Let's see. Now, the following table shows the market situation of surgical masks in economy A, which is a long time ago, if you remember, right? Now, let's mark down, okay? Let's mark down the original situation, okay? The original situation will be this one, okay? The original situation will be this one. We have $45, 500 units, okay? In order to ensure lower income groups can afford the surgical mask, okay, the government has decided to impose a price ceiling of $35, okay? Now, first of all, let's think about it, right? A price ceiling, which is a maximum price, right? 唔准高過35嘅. Now, 45, is it higher than 35? Yes. Therefore, this is an effective price ceiling, okay? 呢個 effective 嘅, okay? So what would be the effect? Although, okay, we will say that although price will drop, but then we also have another problem. Let's take a look at here. At $35, 600, 300, okay? Now, boys, do you remember which quantity do we take? QD or QS? Okay, now if you answer QD or QS, you must suck a lot. Okay, why I say so? Remember, we have mentioned a lot of times, right? We look at the smaller of QD and QS. We don't just look at QD nor QS. 我哋唔係淨係睇一個啊，睇細啲嗰個啊，好嘛 ？We know that unfortunately, originally 500 unit will drop to 300 unit. QT would also drop, which means that the quantity available will drop. Therefore, what happens in English? 我哋用人話講，唔好攞啲 econ 符號啊。It means that people cannot buy masks even though they can afford it. OK， 個問題就係啊，有錢都買唔到啊。OK， even though you have money, you still cannot buy it because it is not available. 知唔知你追女仔啊 ？OK， even though you can afford a lot of things, the girl is already unavailable. So, shame for you. OK, shame for you. 好嘛 ？OK, so you see. Now, what about the diagram? The diagram should look something like this. Here. Now, obviously, we have our demand and we have our supply. Let's call this supply 1. Okay, 好嘛? Now, what happens was that originally remember in exam, if you are given the numbers in your diagram, use the actual numbers, okay? Now, because of the price ceiling, which is here, let's call it PC, we are at $35. Yes, $35. Now, unfortunately, you see it will drop all the way to only 300. Okay, so the QT actually will drop. Okay, now, of course, if you want to complete the diagram, don't forget here, we are at this one, should be 600, right? We also have a problem of shortage. Now, but that is not too important, shortage. The important part is actually this one. The quantity will drop. Quantity transacted, quantity available will drop. Okay, 好嘛? Now, that goes our part A. Now, what about part B? Part B, the government decided it is better to provide a per unit subsidy instead of implementing a price ceiling, which is a much wiser choice if you ask me, right? Now, here, we need to state the amount of per unit subsidy needed to achieve the same market price as the $35 price ceiling. 我哋要個 price 一樣. So here, just like what we did for the MC, for subsidy, if we want the price to be end up at 35, here we need this guy to become 600 so that the new equilibrium will be here. Let's check. 600. Do you see? Originally $50, now $35. So we know that this is 50 minus 35, which is $15 of per unit subsidy. Okay, now we need to explain why per unit subsidy is more effective in achieving the goal. Okay, now the reason, now let's start with the logic down below. Okay, down below B2. Okay, the thing is with a subsidy, supply would increase, therefore price would drop, but at the same time quantity transacted will also increase. Therefore, more people can afford masks. 最重要係呢句啦。With higher availability. 好似串錯啊，是但啦，係你明啦。Okay, availability. Okay, here more masks are available for sales, which will look something like this. Let me use a green one. This one. It should go to here, S2. This is the subsidy of $15. Okay, resulting in the QT increasing from 500 to 600. So this is the main point of part B because of the increase in quantity and the drop in price. 係咪啊 ？Okay， So this is how we do this question. Okay, now hopefully not too difficult for you. Now, this one can say goodbye. This one can also say goodbye. Okay, now let's go to question 2. Okay, question 2. In Hong Kong, most undergraduate programs are subsidized by the government. We found that, okay, the subsidy benefit is much more than the university. Now, here, students, okay, will be consumer. So consumer subsidy benefit more than producer subsidy benefit. Okay, now if you remember, why? Because ED is less elastic, okay, than yes. Explain why this is the case with the aid of a diagram, okay? We need to use a diagram, okay? Now, remember, we first need to state that because of the subsidy, supply would increase. Now, this is very important, okay? Don't miss out this one. Then we say, if the嗱，我呢個寫全寫啊 ，elasticity of demand is lower than 嗱，唔係 elastic 或者 inelastic 啊，係 lower、more elastic、less elastic. In this case, demand is less elastic than that of supply. Then we know that consumer subsidy benefit will be more than the producer subsidy benefit. Okay, now this is very important. Don't say elastic or inelastic. Okay, now with this condition, we want supply to be more elastic. So if you remember, we only change the shape of a supply curve. More elastic, which means it's more horizontal in nature. So let's try this one. Let's try this one. Okay, we have P, we have Q. We don't do anything funny with our demand. Now, let's just make supply more horizontal in nature. Like this, S1. Then, what about here? S2, okay? 嗱，記住啲 step 啊 ，follow the step. We need to first highlight Q2. And Q2 only, remind yourself, okay? Then all the way up to S1. Now, we have our P1, which is all the way here. And then we have our P2. You see, this are drop in price. Who will benefit when things are more are cheaper? Okay, this is our consumer subsidy benefit. But you see here, we still have a little bit of subsidy left. Okay, so this part, the little bit of subsidy left will be our producer subsidy benefit. Okay, we finish the graph with P3 and we also find our Q1 and finish the graph. Okay, now let's check. Consumer subsidy benefit larger than producer subsidy benefit. Exactly what we want. Okay, so GG easy, right? Now, finally, let's move on to the final 2 questions in our chapter revision, okay, which is here. The first one, you are very familiar with. It's about the tobacco tax, okay? 好啦, now this one, okay, I think you already know the data, right? I've talked about it quite a lot of times in our lesson, right? Now, part A1, it requires a little bit of your common sense, which unfortunately, I think many of you do not have, okay? 係咪大家好似冇乜 common sense 啊？係嘛？Here, do consumer or producer bear more tax burden? As we all know, it must be consumer bearing more burden. 因為以前啊 okay, in the past, you will see that the tobacco actually becomes much more expensive, right? Okay, much more expensive. 7-Eleven, I don't think they lose a lot, right? But instead, it is the consumer that have to bear a lot of the tax burden. Okay, now we need to explain why this is the case. Okay, again, consumer subsidy benefit and more than producer subsidy. 唔係 subsidy, tax burden. I'm so sorry, right? Tax burden. Okay, why is it the case? Because ED will be smaller than ES. Okay, so again, 1A2, what we do, we need to explain first of all with tax, then supply will drop. So the condition is when demand is less elastic. 係咪咧？ Consumer eating more, less elastic, eat more, right? The demand is less elastic than supply. Okay, than supply. Okay, 嗰啲唔寫啦。Okay, the diagram again very typical. Okay, we have a normal demand, then we need supply to be more elastic, so more horizontal in shape. Okay, which is like this. This time we have our S1, then we have our S2. This is the tax. Remember, we we highlight Q2. Okay, then we also have our P1. We have our P2. You see, a big increase in price. So who will suffer? Obviously, consumer will suffer. This part will be our consumer tax burden. 睇先，咦，我唔係話錯咗啲啊 ？Yes, I'm so sorry. It should be here. Consumer tax burden. Now we still have a little bit of tax left here. Okay, 嗱，唔好意思啊，樣衰咗啊。So here, this red box will be our producer tax burden. Okay, we finished the graph with P3 and our Q1. Let's check consumer tax burden more than producer tax burden. So easy. Okay, 好嘛？ Now, part B, very funny question, right? It found that many people warn that the tobacco tax cannot effectively discourage smokers to quit, okay? Because smokers will have no choice, but to suffer a disproportionate increase in financial burden, right? Why is it the case? Because it is addictive in nature. Okay, it's addictive in nature. Now, therefore, we know that they tend to be inelastic demand. Therefore, 嗱呢個好緊要啊，好多人答漏咗啊。The percentage decrease in QD will be much smaller than the percentage increase in price. Not a lot of percentage change, not very effective. OK， 好嘛？嗱呢個解過好多次啦，唔解啦，好嘛？ Now, what about part C? Part C here, we need to take some reference. OK, we need to take some reference. Some people basically says, hey government, let's not impose a tax. Instead, let's just ban it outright. 好啦，咩叫 ban 咧？ Basically, think of it as a quota, zero quota. But here, for simplicity's sake, let's not call it zero quota. Okay, instead, let's call it like 100. Okay, quota. Okay, on imported cigarettes. 唔俾你入口咁多。Okay. 唔俾你入口咁多。Now, we need to evaluate the effect of a tobacco tax versus a quota system in terms of several things. Okay, 兩張廢紙先。好啦 here, let's try. Okay, now the first one we need to evaluate will be the price. So let's see here. Now for C1, Price, nothing too difficult. Quota, price increase, of course, right? Tax, also price increase. So basically, they're the same. Okay, not much problem. 好啦 C2, okay, C2 is the important one. 嗱 C 就係緊要啦。Okay, is in reducing the number of smoker. Just now, we already mentioned, because tax lower quantity by increasing the price. Therefore, the drop in quantity is highly dependent on elasticity of demand, which we have already established. If it is inelastic, then the drop in quantity, the percentage drop, would be very limited. 係咪好有限嘅啫 ？Versus a quota, the drop in quantity is regardless of elasticity of demand. Therefore, quota is easier to control, or more precisely, to drop the quantity transacted of cigarettes. 係咪直接了當啊 ？OK， 唔俾你就唔俾你啦。OK， 好嘛 ？So this one very important. This one later on, hopefully in DSE, maybe they have essay on such kind of points. OK， 嗱兩個有分別㗎。OK， quota directly control the quantity regardless of elasticity of demand, while for a tax, it's going to be dependent on elasticity of demand. Okay, if it is inelastic, then the drop in quantity, the percentage would be very insignificant. Okay, 好嘛？ Now, what about part 3? Impact on government revenue 簡單啦，係咪啊？ Tax would result in an increase in government revenue. Now, government 唔係 producer for government. While a quota would have no effect on government revenue. Cost, right? 冇錢收嘛，係嘛？嗱 in reality, some quotas you need to bid for the quota, okay? But probably the revenue received would not be comparable to that of tax. Okay, 好嘛？好啦。Finally, one more factor other than 1, 2, or 3 you deem important to the discussion, okay? I have a suggestion for you. What about fairness? Okay, you can argue that if people, they can pay, then they should have the rights to smoke. Okay, 好嘛？ Therefore, a tax still allow them to smoke, which is fairer. Okay, on another hand, here, you see a quota. Even if you can pay, you still is unavailable. Okay, therefore, you can argue it is unfair for people who can pay. Okay, now of course later on, okay, for those of you who may have studied further chapter 13, you can also talk about externality. Okay, you can also talk about externality. Okay, namely the negative externality. But let's not waste time here. Okay, let's not waste time here. Okay, now finally, let's go to the which one? Okay, I think it's this one. Yeah. Let's go to the final question. This one. Okay, you see a very long paragraph only asking you a little bit, right? Because I don't want to make the homework too difficult for you, right? It says the lack of affordability, okay? Not affordability, but the lack of affordability of housing. 係咪？大家知道香港買樓好折墮啊，係咪啊？Okay, here has been a major concern in policy making for the city in a very long time. Okay, now apart from housing prices, housing rents, okay, 唔係淨係買個價貴啊 ，okay，租金都貴啊 has also been in the spotlight in recent years, right? Now some policies maker insist that Hong Kong should follow the example of the UK. 原來喺英國咧 there is something we call rent control. Although the rent control is not the same as a price ceiling, okay? But for simplicity's sake, okay? For simplicity's sake, let's regard it as a price ceiling, okay? But in reality, of course, it is not. In reality, how does it work, okay? Not allowing them to increase the rents is not a price ceiling, but is a maximum control in increment. OK， 唔俾你加得太多。OK， while others advocate subsidy should be given to landlords. OK， 好嘛？ Now we need to explain one reason to support the use of rent control over subsidy. OK, now as we all know, actually let's answer B first. B, you should already know the answer. Just now we have done it, right? Remember, subsidy will increase the supply, which means both price decrease and quantity increase. Now, this is the main point. Versus, okay, if you remember, in a rent control, quantity would drop. So using English, we say more rental units available at a lower price. OK， 嗱呢個好緊要啊。There are more available versus in a rent control, there will be less available, which does not solve the problem of not being able to rent a house. Okay, now I think this one we should be very familiar with. Now the problem is A. 咁點解用 rent control 啊 ？Okay, there is one very important thing. Boys, remember, subsidy. Are you Harry Potter? Boys, think about it. Are you Harry Potter? Can you make money with your Harry Potter magic? Now, if you can, please contact me immediately. I want you to give me a lot of money using your magic. No, it doesn't. Okay? Who pays the subsidy? Yes, our beloved government. Subsidy would create financial burden for the government. 真係想寫 for Harry Potter. Okay, 好嘛 for the government. On the other hand, when rent control, there is no financial burden. So this is a major advantage of using rent control over subsidy. All right, and with that said, we are done with chapter 11 homework answer. Okay, 好嘛? So good luck to your final exam tomorrow. Remember, it's not going to be easy. So if you do not study, you will die miserably. Okay, go study now. Bye bye.